So with that, I'd like to jump into reading for today. I have two pieces of fiction, and I will just sort of give you guys a heads up. They're about 10 minutes each, so I know attention span is hard on Zoom. I find it hard too. So whatever would be helpful for you guys, if you're like the close your eyes and lean backwards type, I think that's great. Make yourself comfortable. We all know looking at the screen for a long amount of time is hard on us. So it will be 10 minutes and then a little reset and then another 10 minutes, which I think of as like eating like two big appetizers. And hopefully it feels like a meal put together and you get a little chance to like take a deep breath in between them. I'll read the first piece first. It's a full piece, it's short. I think of it almost as a grown-up bedtime story. So if it is evening where you are, lovely. There is a princess and there are horrible geese. And it is called The Goose Girl. It's for Lydia Anderson. The Goose Girl. Sometimes, to make you who you're meant to be, God has to break you, my friend says. We were talking about our favorite books from childhood. On her worn couch with its pattern of roses, our knees tucked up under our chins, the late night quiet is its own familiar presence. Is an imaginary God better than none? I fumble for the line I keep like a smooth stone in my pocket. The consolation of imaginary things is not imaginary consolation. I look down at my friend's legs, knowing she can no longer run. It's painful to speak without metaphors. I wish I held her burdens and made them light, but I need her too much for her to need me too. I stand by a dark well, dropping in stone after stone, because I have no other way to reach the water. Once, there was a girl who was born a princess, my friend continues. When the princess came of age, she was betrothed to marry a prince in a faraway land. For a companion, the princess was given one servant, a wicked girl who forced them to change places halfway through their journey. So the false princess was given to the prince, while the real princess was sent to tend the geese. In some versions of the story, the Goose Girl is so beautiful and virtuous that the king recognizes she must be royalty and restores her to her rightful place. Sometimes the right person sees who we really are, if we've undergone our allotted trials first, if we've been transformed. Not yet a goose girl, not yet truly a princess. She left her mother's house as early snow seeped into the waiting ground. Something in her had always longed to diminish and disappear. The other girl had only to look at her, and she exposed her fraying tethers. My identity deserved to be claimed by someone worthier, she thought, and I, supplanted by someone else's desire. I have been inadequate to my own life. She shook as she put on the other girl's cast-off clothes. The gates of the kingdom meant to receive her closed in her face. Mind, body, spirit. What God has joined together separates when violation is absolute. A sense of self is always altered by its handlers. The absence of feeling is a mercy that comes only after you have lost everything else. Why aren't I dead, she wondered. Homeless, helpless, empty-handed, she walked and walked through the unprotected outskirts of the city. Delirious, trembling, she heard a sound like mocking laughter. In a flash of white wing, geese thrust their long necks forward. Someone was scattering handfuls of grain into the squabbling knots. Some of the seed fell to the ground. She claimed it on her knees. Those who care for the least of these will themselves be cared for. In return for a place to rest her head, she was given charge of the geese. All winter she slept in their muck, cold and chalky. Sensation returns, with time, without consent. Are you in danger again? Is there something you could lose? In the hills, driving her flock, she was startled by the harmless breath of wildflowers. Surely she had been asleep all her days in her mother's womb, in her mother's house, and she hadn't left the womb. Born to be butchered, fattened young were spread on her golden platter, and her only task was to swallow. She, who had always been given more than she could stomach, could have fed 100 hungry girls at her command. Yet, the girl she had been then was not even fit to rule herself. The girl she is now leaves the flock to run, cut by thorns and brambles, in search of a single lost goose. God, why is your fitful mercy an old wound aching wide? Mother, whose face I carry, would you recognize me now? The oil and water within her shuddered together, safety and fear one cloudy spell within her body. She began to inflict herself on beauty, tearing the faces of flowers to shreds. God, who does not tire of making each blossom the same, why do you save your cruel originality for your children? A prick of pain, a thorn has pierced her finger. Blood marks the crown of flowers she's woven. The bond servant asks, what must I do? The liberated ask, who must I become? Yet, I could stay, she thought, among these babbling idiots, these petty, powerless geese. I want no hope, God, for I cannot bear disappointment. But grant us the day's long journey, that we may grow tired and quiet. She led her flock down the hill, back to the gates of her kingdom, stolen, relinquished, real and near. Another life in there could still be mine. She lay her head down on a stone, the flock stilled under watchful stars. How terrifying to imagine becoming a person who desires different things. The sound of singing echoes even in your sleep. My friend yawns, stretches, rubs her legs. Her face tenses with pain. She believes in a purposeful God whose actions can be trusted, whose love is deep and gentle in the end. She is a story I carry inside me. Somehow, I'm afraid of her losing her faith. I fear the breaking of her spirit. The loss of imaginary things is not imaginary loss. When I run out of stones to pitch into the well, I look down into darkness. Thank you, guys. That was the Goose Girl. If you are asleep, carry on. If you are awake, I have another story, and this is going to be an excerpt. So this was published in my book, which is called This Is Where I Won't Be Alone. It's also forthcoming in an anthology called The Art and Craft of Stories from Asia, though not sure when the pub date is going to be with the world as it is, but someday. I wanted to read a little bit from this story because when I was at Kuan, which I mentioned, I had a real breakthrough with this. I realized that my family communicates through a lot of like subtle unspoken things. So like, you know, like that cliche almost of like, you know, my mom says nothing and I know like a paragraph of things that she's communicating. And things like that. But it helped me sort of kind of understand, like before that, I always found things in stories very loud. Like things felt so over dramatized. I couldn't believe that people were saying so many things out loud in stories. And a lot of feedback I got on stories was like, what's going on? Like, oh, you're thinking this, why is it on the page? And I would think like, it is on the page. But that was a time when I really noticed, oh, like it's there for you because you're very used to picking up on things that people are not saying. But in fiction, you need to kind of like give somebody something to kind of help grasp what that is that you're trying to convey. And it was at Kundiman that I realized you can do a lot of that through images, you can do a lot of that through descriptions, and that to me gets through, it helps to say the things that aren't said, but it also enables the reader to get them so that they're not just in my own mind. So yeah, it's made my fiction a lot better, and wanted to read that story since I talked about Kundiman. And here's a sticker I found from Kundiman this week as I was unpacking things in my room. So thanks, Kundiman, Writing Radical Love. The story is called Lee Kuan Yew is Not Always the Answer. It is set in Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew was sort of kind of known as the founding father of the country, really pivotal figure. And you'll see, you don't need to know anything about him. Hopefully the story will contextualize that. This is about midway in the story. The main character is a middle school history teacher. We would call her a social studies teacher, but kind of same thing. And the story is set about 20 years in the future. That night, my mom and I went out for dinner. We fought our way to the front of the queue for the bus, and we fought our way to get into the queue for the restaurant. None of this was strictly necessary, but whatever we do, my mom has to lock horns with other people to get any satisfaction. It makes her feel alive. She got to complain some more about how slow the flying food service robots were and how small the portions had become, which brought her in quite a good mood. For the grand finale, we fought aggressively over the bill. "I'm working now, Mom," I said loudly. "Let me get it." "Save your money," she snapped. "Your children may need it for their education." At home, my mom presented me with a small durian cake, and I acted surprised, as though I hadn't seen the box appear in the refrigerator yesterday or smelled it every time I opened the refrigerator door. It was a wonderfully pungent cake. Our open carton of milk had already absorbed some of its flavor just by proximity. She cut us a finger-thin slice each, and she said, "I appreciate you spending your birthday with your old mom." In the same neutral tone of voice, she added, "I suppose you didn't have a date or anything else planned." I said, "I was thinking of watching this year's Lee Kuan Yew special on Channel 5. "Yo," she said despondently, "even my friends don't watch those." "My students have been fascinated by him," I said. "I use my students as an excuse for a lot of what I do. Being tired, being lazy, being busy, being childish. In fact, they probably make me better than I would be otherwise." I expected a sharp retort from my mom along those very lines, but instead, she looked deep in thought. We sat on the sofa, and I projected the documentary onto the wall. My mom also unfolded the ironing board and did the ironing because she always has to outdo me. The authorities made a different documentary every year for release each March 23rd. Yes, I was born the very day Lee Kuan Yew died, March 23rd, 2015. I don't mean to imply that I feel a special connection to his ghost or anything like that, just that I've always been conscious of having been born into a different era. In the past, our leaders fought their battles to determine what we were not. We were not a British colony. We were not a communist state. We were not part of Malaysia. The struggle now has been to define what we are. Adolescence, we can relate to that, especially those of us who haven't quite figured our way out of it yet. The documentary covered all the major milestones: Lee Kuan Yew's education at Cambridge, the formation of the People's Action Party in 1954, winning every election, banners of the familiar red lightning bolts set in a blue circle, his cabinet all dressed in white to symbolize their freedom from corruption, his tears on national television when Singapore separated from Malaysia, delivering the annual National Day rally. There were clips of him shaking hands with Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Kofi Annan, Hu Jintao, Angela Merkel. That all seems so long ago, before China annexed Taiwan and Japan, before self-driving cars, before the first chip feed was implanted in a live human subject right here in Singapore. The girls, my students, complain endlessly about having to memorize dates and facts. When they turn 21 and their brains have stabilized enough for their chip feeds to be implanted, they'll be able to look up anything they want just by thinking of it. I tell them that there's a difference between retrieving information and knowing how to use it, and that's why they're in school. Another thing they complain about is that what they learn in social studies doesn't affect their daily lives, and therefore it must be irrelevant. They think that they are their own little individuals who sprang forth from nothing and made a new world at their birth. But they are absolutely a product of their history. None of us is exempt from that, and the sooner they learn to accept it, the better. The documentary, nearing the end, jumped ahead to Lee Kuan Yew's death. Crowds gathered at the Padang and around Marina Bay. Some people queued for over 12 hours to leave cards, flowers, and stuffed animals at the designated memorial sites. More attended his funeral than the camera could capture, a slow procession in heavy rain. My mom was getting emotional, which she rarely did. She didn't look particularly sad, but it was as though an invisible wall had been lowered for a while. Enough for you to feel what she was feeling, instead of having to deduce it from conflicting signals. I asked her, "Did you find out before or after I was born?" "Before," she said, briskly running the iron across one of my skirts. "I was in the hospital by then. The nurse I liked came in. I remember the look of shock on her face. She said, 'Lee Kuan Yew just passed away.' That's when I felt that I was going into labor." She gave a short laugh. "Or so I thought. Actually, you didn't come out for another few hours. But you felt what had happened. I felt you feel it." She cleared her throat and continued. "When I was younger, I was very angry at him. In his early days, he tried to make less educated women have fewer babies because he felt that their children would contaminate the breeding pool. He didn't believe people were equal. He did a lot of good anyway. But so did every person who worked hard to make a better life for their family and themselves. Every single person. Thanks, Mom," I said before things could get really soggy. "I love you too." "Good," she said. "Enough of this. Let's watch something else." We put on Gone with the Wind and ate the rest of the cake together. She patted my hair and said, "You're still young, you know, and pretty. You'd be even prettier if you put a little effort into your appearance, like Scarlett." I said, "You don't have to be nice just because it's my birthday." My mom believes in being tough on me. She'd wanted me to win a scholarship to Oxbridge or an Ivy League school. But all I managed was to gain admission to the Teachers Training College, the National Institute of Education. Each night that I received a rejection letter, she steamed a pomfret, my favorite fish, clearly meant for the celebration of better news. I remember looking down at one round, expressionless eye. The pomfret lay flat on its side, its underbelly a dull white gleam. Its fins, like tattered gray sails, hung stiffly over the edge of the dish, bent by the pot my mother had cooked it in. Her cooking was never bad, but those were the worst meals I'd ever eaten. I've hated pomfret ever since. It's just as well she's never prepared it for us again. Eventually, I was happy enough about my results, but it wasn't enough for her. Nothing ever was. Her displays of kindness, even the passive-aggressive ones, weren't the real her. but I liked it when she was nice all the same. Thanks, everybody. Over to Kat.
Inez. I will briefly spotlight myself in between our readers. That was so beautiful. I'm really, I'm blown away as usual. And one of the things I love so much about your work, Inez, is it's always so generous. And to kind of read about this complex kindness, and to write about that with such care is a testament to that. And we'll ask you some more things about it at the end. If others have questions for Inez or comments, you can leave them in the chat if you want to leave questions there that you'd like us to ask Inez at the end, because you don't want to turn on your video because you're also doing yoga or folding your laundry. Please feel free to do that. There is also a link to what Inez read in the chat, and I will reshare the link to Kat's work as well. And as I do, I will tell you the least important, well, she probably also thinks these are the most important things about Kat. Kat loves raspberries.
Yeah.
She would also love for you to donate to her chosen org for the evening, which she'll tell you about in a couple minutes. But she will always accept a raspberry offering. And this is her chapbook, Bird with Teeth. I know that she still has copies that she can sell you directly and mail you. This girl also loves to send a good piece of mail, so please let her mail you something. And she can tell you how to make that possible. Prepare yourself for some whimsy, as well as, I believe, Mary Ruffle gave Kat the gift of deep feeling. Is that right?
I think so.
I think that's right.
I think that's right.
Yeah. And so with that, I leave you with Kat.
Okay. Gonna take my headphones off. And it's warm. So I am going with the CD forum in Seattle. You can all hear me, right? Yes, cool. Okay. It's the Central District Forum for Arts and Ideas, and it's in Seattle. It's a local nonprofit organization, and it's dedicated solely to presenting emerging Black artists, poets, writers, musicians, and they also do chefs too. So they support that, and they give people the opportunities and the venues to make their projects come to life. And they're at the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute, and they're really inclusive and really, really cool. And they're really provocative art, and they're kind of the next thing coming. So they're always just on the edge and full of really good values. And it's awesome. So I chose them. And you can, when you make the donation, when you click on the link, you can actually choose if you want it specifically to go to poetry or dance or just in the general pot for anything. So that's kind of fun. So please donate if you can, if you'd like. Also, Cave Canem is wonderful, and everyone I know who's gone or has been supported by them just found it amazing and wonderful. And so the good people doing the good works, the hard works, the important works. I'm so glad I get to share this space with you all and Inez. And I'm gonna change the view. There we go. Inez, your reading made me think of a few poets that you might like if you're interested in checking out, and anyone else. Shayla Sabri is wrote a book on Sally Hennings, and I think the way that she deals with history you'd find really interesting. And then my other friend Ruth Bauman writes a lot of poems that are also generous, but they're also very much dealing with like fairy tales and like those heroines and things like that. And I think your writing too would also like kind of be friends and hang out. And with that, I am so glad to be reading with you as always, because your whimsy is like fantastic and exciting, and I'm so happy. So I'm going to get started. I am going to time myself or attempt to. Okay, cool. So this first poem is, I'm a letterpress printer, so there's this thing called a guillotine paper cutter, and it's like huge, and it has, to make it cut, it has a blade that's about 26 inches long. It's really, really sharp, and it swings down and it cuts through like a stack of 3-inch paper, but the lever is about as tall as I am, so it's about 5 feet, 4 feet, between 4 and 5 feet, and you have to like pull it down. So that's kind of the blade I'm talking about. I kind of think that's all you need to know, and you might not need to know it. So, what severs? I would take care of you and protect you fearlessly. Man and woman walking across 53rd Street, 12/3/2012, Jason Polin. The blade is long and hurts, the duller it becomes. I am loyal. At least I thought so. Please, I said. We need to sharpen the blade. Cutting apples with a knife so blunt it bruised the back of my hand, slid from the green skin. Before I left you, it wasn't me who left the blade awake, although I let you believe it. Better that way. I measure time by how easy it is to bleed. I would never tell, but when I brought the blade down and it no longer cut, I perched upon the great lever like a gremlin and pounced. Over and over and over, am I sufficiently feral now? Did I mutilate the bond when I told you, and why couldn't you just sharpen the blade? A guillotine is the only soothsayer. I dreamed her teeth cracking. I loved her, so I licked her. A healing. I told you no. I told you what a soul might turn into beneath a microscope. I told you I cannot. And then I was silent, and so was the blade. When I coated my fingers with lead and marked my skin, I thought that was a kind of love. I didn't believe you, but I didn't believe that the blade was me. Either, I have no interest in healing what I severed, only to go back before I saw you slip your hand below the blade to test what severs, and reveal I trusted you, that I no longer bleed. Here's one of my pandemic poems. I don't know, whatever a pandemic poem is, this happened out of it, so it's newer, so we'll see how it goes. Slow burn. When sunflowers cannot place the sun, they look toward one another. Flowers within a flower, all fears the endlessly finite stars. The constellations breathe into the mouth of one another. Nothing diminishes you from me. Storm coming, rain licked and wrath, men that come and came for the selves with smoke. What spite sharpens their teeth? What rot envisions their survival? What one of us was not a ghost before birth? And what reality would I not look to you? When the story unravels, each tangle seems like a fact. In fact, what aspect of those men were ever truly remarkable? What herald of innovation do we pray to now, as if all the wealth on earth could take us beyond Mars? Let the rich craft a tomb of space, a new earth, an old destruction, a lottery of poison river or septic bone, and you, a quiet revelation. After the sun burns itself into dust or quark, still I look to you, all those eyes breeding a different sort of ruin. At the end of the world, there will be peaches and nothing but. I am waiting for you, I am waiting. So this poem is actually really old because it's out of my chapbook. So it might also have an infinite star reference. I have themes. Space density, Montana. Here, my thumb sprouts a canyon grand and many miles to the river vein. Meadow is night sky and all the dandelions, stars. We walk among them dapple bright and knock their heads awry. A callus is nothing except dust, never a medal worn and rusted, spurs a reliquary gift with the size of long past stallions. The people are not people. They are horse and silver bullet. These people will carry their saddle to the grave. Tobacco is silence. The dirt and nails cut to the quick. Silence ferments our bones. Drink beer to remember rain. Sugar, sweet tea. Now we caramel in the sun, cowboy. Bring back the rope. There is no we. Loneliness is a hectare where the roads are littered with off-white crosses. This is another pandemic thing. Spring in the absence of touch. You have never been so far away as through the window. When the crocuses push through, there is no one to show them to. Only my hands, which have atrophied for lack of you, lack of the fine filigree of the universe cutting currents between fingers and flesh against the promise of anything, really. Even our faces are lonely without us. At the grocery store, I cradle the soft catkins, an unnecessary luxury, with the ease of a slowly remembered world. I didn't mean anything by it, so I recoil. In the time before, I didn't mean anything by it. Can we agree that time has never been more physical? Our nows folded and stretched like the bread everyone is coaxing to rise. The blur of days, tomorrow, yesterday, before. Horror is too raw. Still, I am touching the downy catkin. I am photographing the crocus, documenting an unshared life. Distances away, we still speak. So actually, I have some, this is an older poem, but it recently got picked up for publication. I don't remember who by. No, I do, Fugue, sorry. I can hear Lauren laughing in my head. It's been rough, guys. It's okay, I got this. So because it's so old, I kind of don't remember all the smart things I did to make this poem. And so that's embarrassing. But what you might need to know is that I don't know how to speak Latin. So that's going to be fun for everyone involved, hopefully. And I'm really into film, especially like the beginning of film. So this talks about Méliès, who was one of the first like filmmakers, and originally he was a magician. So it's kind of talking about how he would color film by hand. It also has to do with Joan of Arc, and I think there's something else. I did something cool. I don't remember what it was, but I like the poem, so we're gonna go with it. Yeah, so yeah, Méliès is important. Oh, blue. Blue didn't used to be a color. Crazy, right? It actually was more closely associated with green, and so language changes how we perceive color, so it's kind of dealing with that. So since we didn't have a word for the color blue, like we thought about it differently, so like we considered blue things green, so the sky was green essentially, but like that sounds weird to us. So yeah, dealing with semantics. So back to poems. Out of the blue. When Jeanne d'Arc died, she was not instantly sainted. She was not given a Christian burial, as she was already ashed to wind. Every woman is part witch. Apples were never an ornament of knowledge until Milton said so. The misfortune of Latin is evil or apple. Translation hinges on how the translator eats. Hunger for sustenance sake will never sustain a man, By all accounts, ribs are delicious, all fruit, all evil. The struggle between fig and apple. Méliès colored the pyre of Jean by hand. In the West, Hare's orchard shall be found, it will be abundant, a timely word, apples of gold in a setting of silver. Perhaps grains of wheat will frolic in the particles of light from our nearest star. Perhaps, perhaps. Perhaps it was not apple, but evil Eve bit into, the obvious. In John's vision, she saw the voice of God. Anything so holy might manifest as the fallen. So we eat deadfall. Sin's a precursor to contentment. The divine lost in a battle of wits between a minor chord and the apple's seed. The voice of one is the voice of many. Pray in the Latin before the hand and curere to run. Méliès could not paint blue into the scene at the stake. Lapis lazuli was mined for its hue and was reserved for the cloth of Mary's raiment when painted. Blue is a color of rare origin. If it is blue, it is unlikely blue. The previous king believed he was made of glass. A tragedy then, when he bit into the golden apple of discord. In all likelihood, it was an orange. So another theme I'm noticing as I picked out these poems for y'all is that I overuse the word over a lot. I don't know why, I like it. And perhaps because nothing is set in stone. Who knows what anything means? Meaning is important and it has consequences, but you know, whatever. Language. Okay. The revenants of remnants. Everyone would expect ghosts in the belfry, but they're in the garden now too, gnawing on gardenias and gorging themselves on katydids. Worse than that, the ghosts have learned to speak. Over, they say. Over, over, over. Over and over again. When you ask them over, they invite themselves over for tea. Oddly, if only because you've never held tea before. Your home is overrun with ghosts, positively infested. People think of ghosts in homely form, transparently visible, a sight unseen to be seen. You find that ghosts are more like wet cotton, washed beyond the pale. These ghosts are lackadaisical, lolling across the kitchen counter, lounging in mason jars, hanging from a chandelier, like all those melted clocks you've seen in paintings. If you stop to think about it, you won't remember where the chandelier came from. You won't remember ever having a chandelier. This is the thing you can't get over. They feed one another clover petals under the covers of your bed. Taking the petals into their mouths, they seem to swirl them around before puffing them back into the ether. They aren't so much mouths, you think. As a sort of void, a nothingness, there is nothing there. When you go to change your bed sheets, you find they all have 2 holes clipped near the center. You think the ghost might be trying to tell you something. When you ask, they raise what one might call arms over their heads. Over, they say, over. No one comes over anymore. You brew a pot of Earl Grey because it sounds ghostly, but the ghosts are ransacking the pantry. You haven't any food, just a jade plant where a beer bottle stood. Furthermore, the ghosts are ravenous, and you keep forgetting you are hungry. Who will bring you food now? If asked, you don't know what you'd say about the ghosts. They made me shoes. They made them out of feathers. Not that anyone would ever ask. Okay. So this is the Oneronaut at tea time. An Oneronaut is a dream traveler, kind of like an astronaut, but in dreams. So I like those. The Oneronaut at tea time. And it's also printed like this. The Oneronaut at tea time. The tea alone, shrouded in papery cloth, which, of course, is white. So too the moon and the white picket fence that seems to put a please and keep out And the house, long ago whitewashed but still white, and the door, though made of glass, lets one peer into white vaulted ceilings with white walls and white cotton curtains that flap in a breeze without origin, and even the white plush of imported rugs with white patterning, their frayed tassels white, and atop that the tall wingback chairs, their soft supple leather abraded and white, and between them a table made out of white polished stone upon which sits a porcelain teapot, as white as its compatriots, the creamer, the sugar dish, the cups with their saucers, and even the little white spoon, all white. Just like the tray they sit on and the cart they came in on, and out the white paneled windows the stars burn white, their color the same as this white-worn spacesuit covered in the fine white dust of the moon, and the light of the moon reflected is white. I remember my hand is white. My hair too is surely white, and it has always been white. The crushed white bones of me slivered and white. I stop. I sip my tea without the white of sugar or cream and think this sameness, if it's all the same, must cancel all the world out. It's my brother. Hey, Will. We're fine. Okay. This is a new poem. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I guess it's another pandemic thing and other things. It's new. We're gonna try it. Okay. Hey, Will, can you quiet down for a second? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Sorry. A tremendous light. The president hides. It is his power. The president says truths are lies and I am truth. The light came out of me, was put into me. And I am not sick because there is no suffering if I have not suffered. And I suffer when you say my truths are not true. And I suffer when you say there is suffering. There is no suffering. There are bullets as bodies shooting. The president watches as the bodies shooting like stars cascade upon the bodies that are not bodies. The president says, there are no bodies here. Nobody's body's body here, says the president. And the lie is the body does not lie. It rises. From earth we are the earth. So the president says, you bodies will not rise. I will body your bodies and I will rise. And I am the rose garden, which is the voice of all reason. But if the rose rises from the earth, as the light rises from the earth, the president is against a veil of mist that cries of his own making. He raises a book and says, my body is a tremendous light. He says, a book, we must disinfect the disenchanted at all costs. The book says, we all are bodies of earth and light who break against itself, against the bodies that resist the bodies of light, arise again, they light, they rise, they rose. The body against the air in bloom, the cool blue sky, golden sun still rising, the sworn night, the body a fist, an ember, a spark, rising against it all again a bloom. So this next poem is a cento, and I took most of the words from like really old National Geographics because they had some cool imagery. Death came to the world. This is the real thing. Wicker baskets of grapes, those last days courted by an early moon, the fine haze of gold beneath a bluer sky. Oil as well as water will float over the friendly land, but when a hair dies, it dies forever. Time passes beautifully since the moon split the hare's lip with a hatchet. The winter of bone marrow is eaten. Only salt remains of a wild young man sheathed in coral and discontent. He overcomes chicken head hexes. Adrift and a ghost forest, the hand of the age with poor teeth came alive. The progress of a nation casting for butterflies fill the lace curtains and ripening pears with sorrow of creatures that die. They were predators when the bone was still green or fresh. The hunter's fingers formed by glacial meltwater, bones freed from soil where the water still flows. Serenity gives way to ire, an anthem to day's end. A lonely highway, jawbone of a child, puffs of pumice find you, drawn by the moon, come to life again. So I think I'm gonna do my 2-poem warning. I love the 2-poem warning. Helps my brain recalibrate and know, like, we're almost there. Pay more attention, because it's no fun to falter and miss things. So this next poem, I started writing these poems called Elegy for My Undead Brother. And this one is my favorite of those. And my brother is in the other room, so that's not awkward at all. At all. Cool. Okay. Elegy for My Undead Brother. Imagine I am a monster. Imagine there are others who imagine I am a monster. We are standing a ways away from an, oh no. I am so sorry. Okay, I'm gonna start over. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, Elegy for My Undead Brother. Imagine I am a monster. Imagine there are others who imagine I am a monster. We are standing a ways away from an abbey in northeastern France. We are amidst a necropolis. We are burying you, or perhaps a bygone memory of you. Either way, you are there with me. I fondle the thin walls of your cranial bones. When we step into the now excavated grave, you enter your best life. Look at it this way. Catullus says, forever before Ave Aquavale, indicating that the position of your face west and the position of your feet east is a parting gift. For we will never again meet, regardless which side of the veil we inhabit. Scientists insist we are divine omens, that the layout of yourself in death provides the kindness given to you in life. Brother, what do they call stained glass windows in unfinished churches? Do they count the sutures of your wormian bones overlap as I do? I am practicing my monstrousness in the grave. I rip apart your cranium at those seams. I disrupt the repose of your lovingly laid skeletal remains and devour them. If I am to be a monster, I will be a good monster. Okay. Last poem. It is also kind of new. So I'm just kind of riffing. So this is called In Space, No One Will Hear the Rich Scream. Listen, listen. I've gone to live in the Rosemary. This wasn't an easy decision, but it smells nice and I have a decent view of the firmament. The rent was too high. I paid $1,200 for this comfy patch of dirt. It is all my expenses or my only expense. I wiggle and it conforms to my body. Okay, sometimes. Sometimes it is soggy. The landlord comes out for money or at my inconvenience. I mean, I'm overdue a few lifetimes of rent. If I had a calendar, I'd know for sure, but it isn't stealing if no one has money. I mean, everyone has to live somewhere. Even the dead have a patch of dirt or a place to scatter. Really stretch out, you know? Anyway, it's really the only thing that grows around here anymore. My hardy little bush. I could never be a wasteland girl. I haven't a clue, really, but I imagine and can see them twinkling from my patch of soil, or their memory. Distance makes time of us all. Well, or money. Time makes money of us all. I only pay them with the concept of money, and they create bigger and bigger concepts of money for themselves to possess. A failing of the imagination, really. I bet they have fish in space, like space hatcheries. Once I convinced a boy that fish could survive in space, that they could withstand the pressure, and something about gills culling the barest traces of oxygen. So I suppose they have caviar, which I suppose they've always had, or lobsters too, which at first was meant to feed prison inmates. But I think those at the top are really the bottom feeders. Although lobsters do have telomeres that rejuvenate instead of fraying into old age, so they could, in theory, live forever. Similar, I suppose, to how the rich remain rich. I am not a prison so much as I am one of my own making, or did we make ourselves to live like this? I remember before the rich left, some dined on gold, just for shits and giggles, you know. Literally, gold just going right through you. Imagine wealth in, wealth out. You don't even need to eat to survive. I can imagine doing anything that would earn me $2,500 a second. You see, we are always outrunning our own disasters. Or trying to. Once, I was a barista and made cream flowers for rich ladies and was told, this is not hot enough, this is not fake milk enough, this is not what I demanded enough, and you are not pretty enough, and I hope you eat bread. I enjoy bread. I wish I ate bread enough. I wish there was bread enough. I wish there was bread. Bread is community. Bread was made to be passed around. I think of how the language of food is love. Sometimes I try extra hard to make a pretty latte, but only for myself, only as a treat, and even then, I always give it away. I am told about Italy and explained what a macchiato is. Never mind, I make them for scraps of living. I don't know how they do it, but the rich keep coming and they don't stop coming, always with so much but never enough to spare, while those who house moths in their pockets spare enough. Those we smile with when we still smiled and still looked at the stars that twinkled the same as the diamonds on the breadless fingers of Karens and Beckys and Susans, everything about them glittering and cascading like light and stars and planets colliding into black holes consuming it all. Sorry, I am hungry. I am fat with hunger. This expanse just gets more and more endless. Are we space too? What separates us from that blue halo and beyond? We are so far away now that there's no now, or rather time has passed us on. They are dead when we see their last diamond's first winking existence. There is a place in time with oceans and fields, remember? I was young in it. I watched orcas die out as Elon and Bezos ate Chinook salmon, poached, blackened. Have you noticed I am obsessed with consumption, with the consumed? I think a lot of 0 times infinity. Do you have an infinity of nothing or nothing of infinity? In seriousness, the wasteland approaches. I never considered a place that might come to me. The smell of rosemary cracks in the heat, the boughs become brittle. I allow the needles to make a home in my hair, that I might have so many wonders the rich will never be fortunate enough to know, if I could name them anyway. How the house I grew up in became beachfront property. I don't live there because you can only afford a house if you can own more than one. Even the flooded land is too expensive for me. Water is to be rich, flush with currency. The last of the orcas swam here aground and died hollow. All of the glaciers melted, and still we thirst. What do they say about spilled salt? I forget what ice is made of. My landlord comes to collect, but I have become the property there. I do not get my deposit back, since the bush kind of died for lack of rain, although, to be fair, I remind the landlord that I am not the weather. So it is, so it goes. They clear the land and stick a for rent sign in me, as if space belongs. Fuck, I couldn't afford me. I sit alone for a long time empty. What could I house if only we were kinder? Still, I am a host to tenants when the landlord is not looking. I look up at all the sparkling space stations and laugh. One day, their lights are going to go out, the sun will shine on until it does not, and I begin to know if I can walk away, take this body, my body, because there are promises, and there are promises even here. Thank you. All done. Oh, finally. Thanks again. Yay.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Thank you so much, Kat. First of all, let me just say that it's always a delight to read Kat's poetry on the page, but it's especially a delight to see Kat read her poetry because there's such a beauty and theatricality and humor to it that comes through even stronger when it's in her sweet, dulcet tones. And so, again, this is Kat's book. Oh my God, this is Kat's book.
That's my book.
With teeth. Inez's book is called This Is Where I Won't Be Alone. I lent it to someone before the pandemic, so maybe I'll get it back in the year 2022. Kitty is holding it up. So thank you guys so much for joining us this evening for the reading portion of this event.